A Florida Circuit Court judge voided the state's congressional map. The judge said a secret, organized campaign by Republican operatives created districts that favor the GOP. The court ordered the redrawing of 2 congressional districts. This also means redrawing surrounding districts as well. Steve Billet is an associate professor at the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. Steve, welcome to Arise America. I appreciate this.
Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate you having you here. So the judge had a scathing remark in this ruling, and I'm not saying the right word, but can you tell me just a little bit about the argument that the judge made leading to this ruling?
Well, as you know, every 10 years, every state has to redraw the boundaries of congressional districts. And Florida has been engaging in that process since 2012, as they would normally. Unfortunately for the Republicans in this instance, they were laboring under an additional burden because in 2010, the Florida populace passed 2 amendments to their constitution, which actually created additional strictures on the drawing of congressional districts. First, they required that congressional districts be more compact. And secondly, they required that the districts be drawn in such a way that they don't create a partisan advantage for one party or another. And when the judge looked at the results of the process and took testimony over the trial, he determined that, in fact, they produced some very partisan districts in their maps.
Steve, first of all, how unusual is this suit? And the judge even pointed out in his opinion that they might have gotten away with it were it not for this suit. So how unusual is it, and how common is this practice around the country?
Well, the fact that districts are gerrymandered every 10 years in nearly every state is a fact of political life. It's done everywhere. People try to create an advantage for one party or another as they go through this process. And this manifests itself every 10 years. And we tend to have these fights in a number of states over this particular issue. This is unusual since these additional provisions were added to the Florida Constitution. It's really confounded the whole of the situation. And it's interesting, if you look at the people who opposed the addition of these amendments and who urged people to vote against them, there was both a Democrat and a Republican that opposed these these provisions of the Constitution.
Indeed. And so how might this affect the future elections? You know, Florida, particularly in national presidential elections, can be often a key state. So how will this affect then elections going forward, do you think?
Well, part of the backstory here for the whole of this, this story, has to do with the number of congressional seats that are currently held by Democrats and Republicans for Florida. Just at this time, there are 17 Republicans and 10 Democrats. If you look at party registration in the state, though, Democrats look at that and they say, gee, there's a problem here because 41% of the registered voters are Democrats, 36% of the registered voters are Republicans. You know, the Democrats look at these numbers and they say, you know, we probably ought to have more seats here. And you know what? They should. And if, in fact, the voters were more equally distributed through the districts, the Democrats would have a much better chance at winning more seats. The problem is they're not. What's happened is that the Republican legislature has packed certain districts. Mm-hmm. One of them is District 5, Congresswoman Corrine Brown's district, where 70% of the voters are Democrats. Well, right. If they spread those voters out in more districts, regrettably for Congresswoman Brown, she'd have to run a tougher race, and she'd have a tougher time getting elected. But it might open the opportunity for more Democrats to win in some of those neighboring districts.
Indeed. We're going to have to leave it right there. It's very complicated, but we thank you so much for breaking it down. Steve Billets, thank you.
My pleasure.